life support skills are skills which we really need, and we need it more than we can imagine, because we've had this situation whereby even in schools, life support skills, it was sort of exclusive to a club, like you have to join this club to learn this.
Yeah.
But it's very clear that everybody needs it. Even myself, it's not enough for me to know these life support skills. Should something happen to me and the people around me are not trained in life support skills, I will be at a disadvantage.
Yeah.
You cannot train everybody. It is what we would wish for, but you can be strategic in doing so.
An estimated 1.1 million Kenyans fall into poverty each year. And that's because of healthcare costs. Would SHA, SHIF, UHC change that, or is there more? Or perhaps, what's the difference between a pharmacy with a Blue Cross and a Green Cross? What about cancer and the rising incidence amongst the youth? Is it just lifestyle changes, or is there more? Women's health, men's health, your children's health, the economy, this and more awaits you on Season 2 of Kenya's favorite health podcast. My name is Dr. Diana Wangari-Gitau, and welcome to Season 2 of the One Health Lens podcast.
Hi, how are you doing? I hope you've had a very lovely week and your day is starting off amazing. My name is Cheryl Blessing and this is the One Health podcast, the explained edition where we get deeper into some of this medical terminologies and conditions. So today I'm having a conversation with Dr. Seth. How are you doing?
I'm well. Thank you for having me on this platform.
Karibu. Could you tell us what you do, just briefly?
Yeah, so I'm Dr. Seth Matagaro. With regards to this conversation today, I'm a medical doctor by training, profession, and I have more than 5 years in clinical experience practicing critical care in busy setups, both public and in private facilities. That's number one. And number two, also I'm the project coordinator for a non-governmental organization. It's called COHEDA. Stands for Community Communication for Health Development in Africa. And our objective in the recent past has been to disseminate life support skills. And we tend to focus on the remote setup, and we're trying to fill that gap.
I really like that, especially with the focus on the remote areas.
Yes.
So the conversation we're having today is on basic life support.
Yes.
There's some instances where people need emergency medical attention.
Yeah.
There's healthcare that's needed,
Yeah.
but you might be unable to access the medics and all these facilities instantly, especially in remote settings,
Yes.
even sometimes in urban settings.
Yes.
So I want us to get into things that we can do in situations like that, things that we need to understand, because, first aid is something that we're never really taught,
Yes.
but it's a skill that we all need to have.
Exactly.
So I've come across different situations from my childhood to me being an adult now, where some instances happened and I didn't know what to do. Case in point, when I was young, I broke my hand. I didn't know what happened. I fell down, felt like my arm was really hurting. It was painful, but I didn't know what to do. My mom didn't know what to do. They had to rush me to hospital, and it took a while for me to see a medical doctor. And in some instances, you find that people tend to say, apply pressure on the point, massage the area, do all these things, which I came to realize that it can be even more damaging to you. So let's talk about basic scenarios like this, accidents that happen at home when kids are playing, when they're outdoors. What can we do in an instance where a kid falls down, they injure themselves terribly, like to the point of fracturing a bone or breaking a bone? So what are we supposed to do in an instance like that if we are so far away from a medical facility?
Yeah, thank you. I think, first of all, we tend to look at the principles. And the number one principle is for anybody, whether you're a medic And whether you are not a medic is one, to know your limits. Yeah. Let's say, for example, you've said a child has fallen down, probably broken a bone, which you've not confirmed, but you highly suspect that it has happened.
Yeah.
Of course, the first thing is, do you have a first aid kit in the house? First aid kit can be having things like, pain meds that you can give your child. Of course, having known what probably the dosage of the child is and that kind of thing, there's always that leaflet that explains to you, if your child is this age or this weight, this is the dose you're supposed to give. That's the first thing. Get rid of the pain, or try to alleviate it as much as possible. Number 2 is to look for any wounds. Is there a wound and is there bleeding? And of course, you want to arrest that bleeding as soon as possible so that it doesn't worsen, because if the child continues to bleed over a long period of time, it can lead to other detrimental effects on that child.
Yeah.
Number 3, if you suspect the bone is broken, you don't really want to manipulate it. Especially if you're not so sure of what you want to do with that, the area which has been broken.
Yeah.
So you want to do what is called splinting. So just keeping it in that position, and making sure the joint below and the joint above, is not moved, so that you don't further worsen that fracture. But the most important thing is, as you're doing all these things, you are trying to get transport to the nearest facility, because remember, know your limits.
Yeah.
So know what you can handle then, and if you feel this is beyond what you can handle, rush that child to the nearest facility. And I'm saying all this assuming that the child is awake. You see, if the child, sometimes the fall can be bad, it can be from a height, these things happen, apartments and all this. We are assuming that this child is awake. But when we talk about life support skills, is like when you notice that the child's consciousness has been altered, or there's actually a loss of consciousness. Then this is what, like, even our NGO is really trying to push. What do you do in that scenario?
Yeah.
Because when the child loses consciousness, you don't know, is the child breathing?
Yeah.
Is the child's heart beating?
You don't know the extent of even the injury.
Exactly.
Yeah. And it's fascinating that you say that, because there are instances where someone faints.
Yes.
And you may not know what's the cause of this person fainting.
Yeah.
You may not know if it's something that's a deep medical condition, if it's something underlying, or if it's just because of fatigue or everyday wear and tear. So in instances like that, you've mentioned, if the child is conscious, if the individual is conscious, you administer some pain meds, you do all these things. And let's bring it back to the fact that you mentioned a first aid kit. Most people do not have first aid kits in their homes. People, maybe in their cars sometimes, at workspaces sometimes, but at home, unless dawa ilibaki from so when someone was unwell. So the first step is having a first aid kit, right? So before I get into this state where someone is unconscious, what are some basic things that we need in our first aid kits? You've just mentioned pain meds. What else do we need to probably just put together in case someone is injured or someone needs some medical attention?
So thank you. So when we talk about a first aid kit, again, based on principles, you have this first aid kit in anticipation in case something happens. How do I address this? And like when you are having this life support, we say it's as simple as your A, B, C's. Like A for airway, B for breathing, C for circulation. But even before all that, you who is giving this support, you also need to check your surroundings and make sure that it is safe for you. You cannot offer care if the environment is not conducive, is not safe for you to actually provide that support. So of course, the first thing when you talk about safety, your gloves. You need gloves, because you don't know who will, drop down in your house.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be somebody in your family. It can be, a guest. You don't know
true.
about this guest. You don't know what conditions he has, whether they're communicable, and that kind of
Yeah.
thing. So you need your gloves. Number one. Number two, in case for things like bleeding, you need some cotton. Yeah, you need some spirit, or antiseptic, something to clear. Let's say it's a dirty wound, and you want to clean it. Of course, you cannot really bandage a wound which is dirty. So there's that basic cleaning that you're going to do. So basically, you have your gloves, you have your antiseptic, you have your gloves, pain medication. Like and I'm not advocating for people to self-medicate, but it is just to be there. And,
just to help just ease the discomfort of the person.
And also having in mind that different people have different dosages, for example. So children have this kind of dosage, for adults this kind of dosage. But basically, those are the basic things that you need. As we continue to offer these life support skills, when it comes to the airway, some people collapse, and people shy away from this mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. It can save that person's life. But I also tend to understand, I see where this person is coming from. You don't want to plant your mouth on somebody you don't even know.
It might be a stranger.
Exactly. So there are these barrier devices that you can use. It tends to keep a barrier between you and the person you are resuscitating, but you're also able to provide that.
And how does that, I've always been curious. Now that you're saying that, honestly, I've seen it in movies. I've seen CPR being done in movies, and I know you're supposed to compress the chest or something in intervals and then offer mouth to mouth. But what's the exact procedure? What should I do so that I'm not even causing more damage to this individual?
And this is what you're asking is basically that training. It is, one, to understand why you're doing it, but most importantly, to understand that technique. Because, like movies, you see, and, you've talked about fainting, and some people tend to resuscitate based on what they've watched in movies. And maybe sometimes it's a disadvantage for doctors. Sometimes we watch movies and we can clearly see this is not how you resuscitate. But of course,
for us, we're like,
the movie has
I
to,
saw it, and I just have to compress the chest without even understanding what part of the chest you're supposed to compress.
So, or sometimes somebody can faint, and you see everybody rushing, lift the legs. Nobody is checking whether the guy is breathing. Nobody is checking whether the heart is beating. You understand? So there is always that structured approach to resuscitation. It can be monotonous, but if you get it in your mind, you'll understand, you'll come to appreciate why it's important to always approach resuscitation in a structured manner. You get what I'm saying?
There's a protocol you have to follow.
Exactly. So what I usually say, somebody has collapsed. Can be in the train, because I've used the SGR at one time, and somebody collapsed and we had to do something. Nobody predicts that he's going to fall down
at this exact
on 17th
time
at 11. Nobody predicts.
True.
Your child does not plan to choke on a toy. Today. It can be so random. Like deep in the village, somebody was playing with a bean seed or a chokes, and then it went. So nobody plans for this thing. So all what you have to do, once you have this knowledge with you and these skills with you, you just have it in case something is going to happen. And it's not going to happen the way you want it to happen. So that is why you need that structured response. So what I say, somebody has collapsed. One, I check for my safety. I'm not going to resuscitate somebody in the middle of a fire. A tanker has just, had an accident.
There's
petrol everywhere. I'm not going to start doing resuscitation there. I have to check for my safety. At least let the requisite people come, shift this guy to a safer environment so that I'm able to provide this resuscitation. So once I've confirmed that my safety is guaranteed, then now I go to my A, B, C. So A for airway, B for breathing, and C for circulation. So it's usually a bit different for adults and children. So for children, it's purely A, B, C in that order.
Yeah.
And these things occur simultaneously. So I'm checking for the airway. Is there something obstructing the airway? Is there like a piece of food or a toy or any inanimate object inside the mouth?
Yeah.
I clear it. I position the head in such a way that the tongue does not fall back and block the airway. So that I've made sure that my airway is
clear.
Okay. It's clear. And as you're checking for that airway, you are looking for that breathing. That breathing, when you are, you've checked and you are looking at the chest, is the chest rising, and is it rising adequately? Normal breathing, not the shallow. There are different types of breathing. There's a type of breathing which is abnormal, which is not considered normal breathing. And this is in the very emergency, those emergency situations whereby this person is actually on the brink of death.
Yeah.
So it needs to be that proper. Like you can, when you put your face close to the child's face, you can feel the warm air as the child is breathing, and you can see that the chest is rising
and falling.
So you've checked that your breathing is okay. And lastly, your circulation. Check for the pulse. So sometimes very small children, it's difficult to feel for the pulse here.
Yeah.
So you can check here, or you can check here.
And what's that we check? Because we see that, but people don't understand. Is it a blood vessel? Is it? Why do I feel the pulse on different points? Why not? Because you've pointed out the left. Can I feel it on the right as well? Or which side of the neck?
Part. Basically, it's all coming from the heart. So when the heart pumps, it provides an impulse. So it's very strong up here because there's a very big artery, a very big blood vessel that is transporting blood. So you can feel it here.
Yeah.
Sometimes you can feel it here. And that's why I'm saying you are safer, for a non-medic, it's safer to check for the pulse here.
Yeah. Because here you're most likely to feel it.
Yeah, you see where this Adam's apple is. Just above and slightly outwards. That's why you feel it. Yeah. So you've checked your airway, you've checked your breathing, you've checked your circulation.
Yeah.
Focus on those three. Anything beyond that is beyond your scope if you're not trained.
Yeah. It's basically what you said. You have to know your limit.
You have to know your limit so that you don't do something that is going to really further injure this patient.
Yeah.
You understand me? And you are checking to intervene. You're not just checking to note it down. So if the airway is blocked, do something about it. And do like if something is blocking the airway, remove what you can see.
Yeah.
Don't go blindly just poking because like in your mind you've told yourself that I saw this child swallow a coin, so you're going in there like really struggling to look for that coin.
Yeah.
Kama ishaenda.
Imeenda. Just do
so
what you
that
can.
will be handled by somebody senior, or that's going to be handled by a doctor.
Yeah.
In a setup where they're able to perform these interventions. So at the home setup, know your limits. If it's the airway, remove what you can see. Position the airway well.
Yeah.
And that is something I can demonstrate further. At that time, you're checking for the breathing and also checking for the circulation. So if the airway is blocked, remove whatever is blocking. If there's no breathing, then you can provide the resuscitation. If you know how to, bag a patient and you have that mask and bag, splendid, you can use it.
Yeah.
If you have that barrier device,
you can utilize that to help with the breathing.
If you don't have, and maybe it's somebody because you cannot be forced to do something. If you feel like that your safety is not guaranteed, please don't do something that you feel is not safe for you.
Yeah.
Then you can give that mouth. Let's say it's your child. You can give that mouth resuscitation. And if the heart is not beating, then that is when you start your compressions.
The compressions. Oh, okay. So there's a reason for all that.
Exactly.
There's a reason for doing the mouth to mouth and doing the pumping. Because I always assumed I don't know what I thought, but I always assumed the pumping is just to help like your lungs push air out. And
No, basically, so for the compressions, you're basically trying to squeeze the heart. Like if you had the opportunity to like just hold that heart, you're just
that's
doing
what you're
that.
doing to help
because
the
you're
pumping.
doing that so that blood can be pumped all over.
Yeah, which is so fascinating. And I know most of us perhaps didn't know that.
Yes.
And if you did,
Yeah.
wow, that's
Yeah.
impressive, especially as a non-medical practitioner.
Yeah.
But now my next query is, does it cut across the ABCs? Does it cut across every situation? Because we've just talked about perhaps choking or fainting.
Yes.
Let's say someone has epilepsy and they have a seizure.
Yes.
They collapse and fall down. I've experienced this when I was in high school.
Yeah.
So there are instances where I've seen them put something in between the mouth.
Yeah.
It's like put a spoon, put something. Why is there a need for someone to do that in a situation like that?
Well, one, it's not really recommended. Now you are talking specifically about seizures.
Yeah.
The most important thing about a seizure is to make sure that that environment around the patient experiencing a seizure is quite safe. You don't have boiling water
around them.
You know, some people might even have a seizure while cooking.
Yeah.
You might have a seizure. You know, like I remember I used to have a classmate in high school, and you know those beds, the way they are placed, you don't want somebody fitting in this metallic
frames, even in the class, because one time it happened in a class, and there are desks, chairs, all these things around them, and they have no control over their body. So you have to clear the environment. Again, it's about safety for yourself and the individual.
So what I would advise on that is, one, make sure that environment is clear for that person. The person who is seizing, clearly his heart is beating. I mean, it's clearly his heart is beating, and you know is able to breathe. Sometimes they even have
foam or something.
They foam and they produce these noises. You can't really start addressing their breathing when they're still seizing. You have to wait for that seizure to stop. They're still breathing, you know, you can see they even breathe hard. You can just put them in a recovery position. You understand? And when you're doing all these things, once the seizure is done, remember your safety. Don't go resuscitating somebody who's throwing his hands and feet. You know, once it's clear that your safety is guaranteed, go and check your ABCs, like your airway, because sometimes they seize and their tongue falls back and they're not able to breathe. And that is where, you know,
you have to position it again
properly. Again, you check their breathing and you check their circulation. You remember I said it's slightly different for adults and children. For children, when they lose consciousness, most of the time it's more to do with their respiratory system. With adults, it's more to do with their cardiovascular, you know, their circulation. So in adults, instead of starting the ABCs, they tend to start more with the circulation. So we come to them, and the first thing we check is the pulse, so that we quickly do the circulation.
You have to do the compression.
But A, B, C. If you can just focus on that as a non-medic,
that's beneficial. And I think that's something that we can all very quickly remember, because airway, breathing, circulation.
Exactly.
Let's talk about, you mentioned about remote areas. We have our grandparents, sometimes our parents, all these people who may have underlying conditions. Sometimes it's cardiovascular issues, like they have pressure, they have diabetes, they have all these heart conditions that may affect them. What happens in a case where an attack has happened, particularly the way you're saying relating to cardiovascular issues, and I'm far from a medical center, what do I do in that case? Is it the same thing that I should apply?
It is the same. Because again, always stick to, because I always tend to look at these things in terms of principles. Always know your limits, because I can give that scenario. I've had a patient who based in an urban setup, enjoys the privileges, the benefits of private insurance. but that lady had to go to where she comes from, like deep in the remote areas.
Yeah.
And she had an emergency there.
Mm.
And she had to be taken to a hospital nearby. You see, if that emergency occurred, let's say in the urban setup, there are ambulances all over, you can call. And,
and in an instance they're there and they transport you.
You can get them to hospital. But then this happened in the unexpected of areas.
Yeah.
But still the emergency happened. You don't plan for these things.
That's true. Yeah.
And what happens? Sometimes you get an emergency, like all these emergencies we just talked about, the seizure, the choking and all that. So you can imagine you've gone to somewhere deep, in the village.
Yeah.
The roads are not quite, they're not well.
It's very
maram, it's
hilly.
And all that. You don't have a toll-free line you can call for an ambulance.
And most times these guys don't even have cars.
Yes.
Not everyone has the luxury of, having these cars that can commute wherever.
So I just want to paint this picture. So your child has choked. You don't have those skills. Yeah? Panicking, typically of what you would expect.
Yeah.
So your child has choked. You're panicking. The father is panicking. The mother is panicking. Of course, they're concerned. They want their child to be better. But they honestly don't know what they're going to do. They don't have an ambulance they can call. So, maybe the mother stays with the child while the father rushes out of the house. And, in the remote setup, the neighbors are not that close. Like you have to rush or probably call if the network is good and hope. And you're calling hoping that they have a vehicle. Or they call the nearest motorbike.
Yeah, to come and get them.
All that time your child is choking. And, when time keeps on progressing, the more time this child is experiencing starvation of oxygen, you are putting this child at a risk of irreversible damage to that brain. You get? So, finally, you found a vehicle. Put the child in with the mother and the father, and driving probably 10 kilometers on a Maram road, and you get this child to a hospital. Yeah, you've just dropped the child, or the neighbor has dropped the child in a hospital. This is not an ambulance setup. Like when you have paramedics, like you call, you have an address system, they come, they assess, they call the hospital so that the hospital can prepare themselves for this emergency.
And even on the way, they're administering some first aid.
They're administering first aid. When they get to that hospital, there's a nurse there, and he's receiving the information like, this is what we've been able to do. This has been the trend while we were in the ambulance, and basically now this is the child and this is the condition, so that in your mind you are prepared. Now imagine you've just gone there with your neighbor's vehicle. Like you cannot express yourself medically, so you cannot give that information that is probably very vital that they need. So they have to work assuming that nothing has been done. Yeah, you get. And that process of not being able to anticipate for that particular emergency, even for the hospital, it will cause certain delays. And at the end of the day, you find that the child has an irreversible damage just because of a simple toy. A toy this size has led to, destruction of that child's ambitions and all that,
So again, it goes back to the ABCs.
It goes back to the ABCs.
If you can do that, then you can save this individual probably damage that could harm them and cause more damage in the long run. So unfortunately, because time is not on our side, I like that we've established that it's as simple as your ABCs, just knowing the basics and knowing your limits. So trying to find help as you administer some first aid. So perhaps you can tell us, you mentioned that you're with an organization that deals with trying to educate these basic life skills to people in remote areas. So maybe you can give us a parting shot, what we need to take away, because I think one major takeaway is the ABCs and that you need to do something but know your limits. What else do we need to probably be aware of in cases where life support is needed, and we need to offer some first aid, we need to offer some support before we get to a medical practitioner, particularly for the non-medics and the common people and all of us who are not aware of the intricacies of all that. So what's a parting shot that you can give us on that note?
I think what I can say is that these life support skills are skills which we really need, and we need it more than we can imagine, because we've had this situation whereby even in schools, life support skills, it was sort of exclusive to a club, like you have to join this club to learn this. But it's very clear that everybody needs it. Even myself, it's not enough for me to know these life support skills. Should something happen to me and the people around me are not trained in life support skills, I will be at a disadvantage. So of course, you cannot train everybody. It is what we would wish for, but you can be strategic in doing so. There are certain populations, like if you have a village, we have these community health workers. You can sort of target them because these are the people who walk around. Like if you have an estate, you can have at least 3 people or 4 people who are actually trained, not just one person. Let's say in a corporate setup, like you have a team of people who can actually perform resuscitation. Very importantly, accidents, because we tend to see, because even where I work, we tend to have road traffic accidents in highways. Who are the first people to arrive? Most of the time you'll find it's police officers. Officers will come there before even medics will come. And you want this officer to be equipped with this knowledge, so that if they see, it's not just about collecting dead bodies. Some of these people are actually alive.
True.
And you cannot really rely on the passers-by, the witnesses. It has to be, like the officer needs to be skilled. They need to have those equipment ready. Old people, there are some people, I always say their children are abroad, and for one reason or another, the elderly are left with nannies to take care of them. These are people who have diabetes, heart diseases, asthma, all these conditions. They're actually at a higher risk of, having that loss of consciousness. So the nannies who are always with them, you'd want to train them. Sometimes the security guards in the estate. If you really look at it, you'll find that it's very important for not even medics, because remember, we have a shortage of doctors in this country. I think the last time when we had a strike in 2016, the ratio was, I think, 1 doctor serving a catchment area of probably 19,000. And it's supposed to be 1 to 1,000. So you can imagine. I think in 2023 it was 1 to 17,000. Still, there's a huge gap. It cannot be only the medics who are trained in life support skills. There is that gap. We have ambulances which are there, but there is that cost issue to it. Like you can have insurance, but it doesn't cover that ambulance. Some people where the ambulances are non-existent. So there is a huge gap, and that is what we in COHEDA are really trying to fill that gap. And I think it's platforms like this which really help our cause.
And I really like that. We all need some basic life support skills. It's the least that we can do, especially if you're just a human being, because you can never predict. It can be at your home, your workspace, with your friends, you're out maybe somewhere having lunch, dinner, someone collapses or faints. So basic life support skills are something that we all need. Unfortunately, we're also in an era where there's a lot of information on the internet. So it's just a matter of being intentional and learning about it. And again, your ABCs, I hope you take that away from this conversation. Airway, breathing, circulation. So I think that's it for us today. I hope you've had you've taken away something from this conversation. It's been very insightful to me. I appreciate it. And we hope to see you again soon.
Thank you.
So that's it. I hope you have a lovely day ahead. Come back again again, next week we'll have another interesting conversation, just the explained version of One Health Lens, where we get deeper into the terminologies and conditions. So my name is Cheryl Blessing. It's been such a pleasure hosting you, and I'll see you guys next time.